They told me I was an intruder, a shadow trespassing in a room where my presence was unwelcome. My name, they said, was nothing more than a faint smudge scrawled in the margin of her grand chronicle. Yet when the lawyer's tongue unraveled a single line, the entire ground beneath us shifted. I caught the metamorphosis in Clara's face, jaw clenched, eyes sharpened to steel. She had walked in expecting a coronation, her inheritance a crown of certainty, her mother's empire, the fortune polished by decades, the legacy she assumed was carved in her veins. But in one breath all that grandeur crumbled. Her confidence, once radiant, seeped away like ink in rain. She turned toward me, not as daughter to father, but as though betrayal itself had materialized in human form. I never sought this war. Peace was all I craved at this age, when most men prefer quiet gardens to battlefields. Yet here it was, thrust upon my lap, fierce and unavoidable. Before I guide you further into this tale of what was bestowed, what was stolen, and the toll it demanded, let me tell you this. If your heart resonates with stories of kinship fractured, of loyalty colliding with pride, then walk beside me. And if you wish to hear more of such reckonings, I would ask gently, like, subscribe, leave your truths in the comments. For your stories matter as deeply as mine. That afternoon, I sat at the far edge of a mahogany-walled chamber, my hands folded like a supplicant, attempting to dissolve into the leather chair. The air smelled of varnished wood and parchment, sterile, solemn, thick as judgment. Clara sat front and center, luminous in her tailored suit, hair pulled taut into a crown of ambition. To her this day was no legal formality, it was ascension. She never cast me a glance. Silence can thunder louder than accusation. A stranger would have mistaken us for estranged colleagues, not blood tied by years. Such was the gulf that time and indifference had carved. The lawyer's voice droned, steady, rehearsed. At first Clara's lips curved wider, each word feeding her pride, her name, her entitlement, her spoils. She leaned forward like a monarch extending her hand for jewels. Then a pause, and then he spoke the sentence. I won't enumerate the figures, they were immaterial. What mattered was the quake, the shift in the air, the metamorphosis in her face. Her breath snagged, knuckles tightening white against the armrest. She turned toward me with eyes sharpened into blades, wordlessly asking, "How dare you still exist in my story?" For years I had dwelt beyond her orbit. My life was chalk-dusted classrooms, teenage questions sharp enough to bruise a heart. Why does love wither? Why do people leave? Answers eluded me then, and even now they hover out of reach. As I sat beneath the weight of her glare, memory pulled me backward, to Alina, my once beloved, to promises spoken over second-hand furniture, over a borrowed crib, when life was modest yet brimming with laughter, before ambition swelled and drowned intimacy, before my daughter learned to measure affection not with embraces but with accounts and empires. The lawyer's cadence continued, but his words blurred into mist. I saw only Clara, her disbelief calcifying into rage. She leaned to hiss something inaudible, but I felt its meaning. You are unworthy. Perhaps she was right. I had never built empires. My life was essays scrawled in red ink, young minds coaxed into seeing poetry in the mundane. When the bell rang, I returned to a house colder than home, a showroom of her mother's triumphs rather than a hearth. We didn't collapse with one cataclysm. We frayed by 1,000 small dismissals. Now, years later, that unraveling had circled back, bound in her mother's testament. Why had Alina done it? Was it remorse? Was it pity? Or perhaps it was love's last ghost, faint, almost forgotten, yet still strong enough to shake us all. The revelation struck like iron. Clara expected a throne, she was handed a tether, and what I received was everything else. I still hear the shriek of her chair scraping back, carving into the silence. Her voice trembled, not with grief but with fire. That was the moment I understood. This battle was never about money. It was about remembrance, about whose narrative would endure. I cannot despise her rage. Children steeped in luxury often believe it is their divine right. And in truth, she had worked alongside her mother, tasted the glitter, stood beneath the chandeliers. I was the phantom father at the edge of photographs, the irrelevant shadow, But life has a cruel habit, it resurrects what we pretend is gone. Ignored truths return, louder than before. And that day they returned cloaked in her mother's last decree. The chamber thickened with whispers, eyes darting sideways. I sat unmoving. What words could absolve me? That I had not pursued this, that I never wanted it. No one would believe such denials. I knew then the storm had only sparked. The inferno was yet to roar. That afternoon did not inaugurate a quarrel over estates or accounts. It kindled a war of memory. Even as I speak to you now, I feel its echo, the scrape of wood, the frost in Clara's stare, the unbearable weight of a legacy unwanted yet inescapable. For life does not pause to ask if we are prepared. It simply thrusts the truth into our hands. And truth, as I discovered that day, extracts its payment without mercy. I remember that night as though it had been pressed freshly into memory. The library exhaled the perfume of aged parchment and dust, an aroma cloaking the room like an ancestral shawl. Winter gnawed outside. Heavy coats slumped over shoulders, boots thudded against warped timber planks, and snow feathered itself across the amber glow of the street lamps. I had gone to the community reading for the warmth, nothing nobler than that. And then Elena rose. Her voice, taut as a bowstring, sliced through the hush. She was not timid, she was a blade. She contested the speaker, proclaiming that women deserved parity in commerce and art. The crowd shuffled in its seats, discomfort muttering through the air, but she did not relent. Each word fell with the weight of a lived wound. I lowered the book I'd been feigning interest in, drawn instead to her defiance. That was the genesis, not roses nor whispered promises, but a woman insisting on her right to be heard, and a man who realized he wanted to listen forever. When the gathering ended, I lingered at the doors, clumsy with my gloves. She strode past, her coat a scarlet flare against the pallid night. I told myself to remain silent, she was beyond my reach, but the words escaped, "You spoke well tonight." She turned, eyes keen, then softened, a faint smile unfurling. That smile clung to me longer than her argument. We began modestly. Coffee at the Maple Street diner, walks beneath thawing branches when the snow surrendered. I was 27, a weary teacher clad in thrift shop suits, essays piled higher than ambition. She was 25, sketching visions into worn notebooks, her mind rushing faster than the world could keep pace. Our conversation stretched into hours. She dreamed of a fashion line that did not merely cover skin but crowned confidence. I longed to mold young souls, to prove that stories had worth in a culture enthralled by coin. We were unlike, yet our differences dovetailed. I steadied her. She buoyed me, or so I believed. Marriage arrived swiftly. No chandeliers, no orchestras. A bare town hall, vows murmured, pie afterward at the diner where laughter had already seasoned our evenings. She wore a plain dress, not her own creation, but still she radiated. My pockets were empty, but I believed my heart sufficed. She seemed to believe so, too. Our first apartment was scarcely larger than my classroom. Paint peeled like old scabs, pipes banged in winter, the radiator hissed its grievances. Still, it was ours. We scattered books on rickety shelves, dragged in mismatched chairs, and placed a hand-me-down crib when Clara arrived. Nights were sleepless. Colicky cries, unpaid bills, suppers stretched with imagination. Yet my definition of happiness begins there. Clara burst into the world screaming, fists clenched against destiny. When I first held her, terror gripped me, she felt as fragile as parchment. Elena laughed, teasing that I looked like a man safeguarding the Constitution itself. That laugh lingers still. We survived on fragments and faith. My sleeves smudged with chalk dust. Elena hawked handmade dresses at market stalls. We sparred over groceries, cars we couldn't afford, the refrigerator droning louder than the news. Yet our affection stitched the gaps. We were poor, yes, but not destitute. Poor lacks money. Destitution lacks hope, and we brimmed with hope. Elena's drive never dimmed. Night after night she bent over the kitchen table, needle flashing under a single lamp, humming folk songs from her youth. I marked essays beside her. I thought us a pair, two sides of the same coin. In truth, her gaze was fixed on horizons I could not see. One evening I returned from teaching to find her pacing, a letter splayed on the table. Approval for a business loan, had applied without a word. My gut twisted, such a choice made in secrecy, yet her eyes blazed. "This is it, Martin," she whispered. "This is the beginning." I believed her because love persuades you to silence your doubts. 6 months later the boutique opened. A meager storefront, yet Alina breathed fire into it. She painted walls with her own hands, crafted displays, charmed customers with sharp wit. I carried shelves, hammered nails, but the shop was undeniably hers, and she flourished. Orders multiplied. Local papers printed her name. She who once stitched by candlelight now stood under white-hot bulbs, smiling into cameras. I told myself her triumphs were ours, but unease coiled quietly. At school I corrected grammar in faltering essays. At home I watched her ink contracts with men in silk. A gulf widened between us. Clara grew alongside that gulf. As a girl she had raced into my classroom, palms dusty with chalk, eager to show her sketches. Later her gaze shifted. No more crayons, she wanted gowns like her mother's. She carried herself with the hauteur of a princess while I still bore stacks of notebooks. One Saturday I planned a picnic by the lake, just us three, bread and sunlight. At breakfast Alina waved it aside, meeting with a buyer. Clara hardly lifted her eyes from a glossy magazine. I sat with the basket half-packed, wondering when simple joys had grown antiquated. Sophia emerged soon after. Young, obedient, fervent. She shadowed Alina, pen always ready. She idolized my wife, and Alina adored the worship. Sophia was courteous to me but remote, a figure stitched from Alina's new world. By then the tide was turning. Alina's ambitions surged far beyond the shore where I still lingered. Clara, bright and impressionable, followed her mother's compass. And I remained the man streaked with chalk, clutching to values that looked small against champagne flutes and magazine covers. The world was aligning, yes, but already the floor beneath us was cracking. Success does not tiptoe. It storms through the door, shoves the chairs aside, and commands the room with reckless authority. That was the sensation when Alina's humble shop erupted into something monstrous and magnificent. One evening she stitched cloth at our kitchen table beneath the yellow light bulb. A week later she was darting from fittings to suppliers, trailed by reporters ravenous for a glimpse of her meteoric ascent. The town, perhaps the whole world, seemed starved for her, and she served them without restraint. The boutique doubled, then trebled. Her creations spilled onto the pages of glossy magazines left in dentists' offices and corner cafes. Strangers began invoking our surname with reverence, as if Alina alone had dragged the community from homespun obscurity into cosmopolitan chic. Perhaps she had, but triumph exacts its toll. Family meals dwindled into greasy cartons on the counter. The clatter of utensils was replaced by the insistent buzz of her phone. Clara learned to whisk away her mother's plate while Alina jotted frenzied notes for yet another rendezvous. I attempted to speak about school performances, a poem I had discovered, fishing trips long promised, but my words drifted, untethered, into a void she no longer inhabited. I told myself it was a season. Once stability arrived, she would find her way back to us. Yet ambition, once tasted, clings like wine on the tongue. Clara absorbed it all. At 12 she demanded her first custom garment, something no classmate could mimic. I raised a brow. What's wrong with the mall? Her look was as though I'd offered her refuse from the curb. Alina only smiled, murmuring, "She must stand apart, she is my daughter." And thus an invisible boundary formed. I became the father of modest hopes, Alina the mother of indulgence. Clara, malleable and dazzled, discovered quickly which side sparkled brighter. I recall the night she abandoned bedtime stories. We had devoured them for years. Shel Silverstein's wit, Wilder's prairies, Twain's riverbanks. But she came one evening clutching a fashion magazine instead. "Mom says I should study this." I nodded, though something splintered deep within. A ritual fragile yet sacred gone. Meanwhile, Sophia emerged as Alina's second skin. Clipboard always in hand, phone buzzing, devotion unwavering. She was courteous to me, but her gaze betrayed pity, as though my world of books, chalk, and earnest dinners belonged to a dusty museum, a relic exiled within his own home. Still, I taught. I loved the smell of chalk dust, the murmur of restless teenagers, the electric moment when comprehension dawned on a student's face. Yet in my own household, my voice grew thin, an echo in an abandoned corridor. Lessons on humility were met with Clara's rolled eyes. A suggestion of camping was dismissed by Alina with a smirk. "Do you wish to live like a pioneer?" The chasm widened. One late night, Alina collapsed into the living room, perfume clinging to exhaustion. She discarded her heels and slid a folder before me. "Contracts," she breathed. "Investors want regional expansion. Martin, this is our moment." I looked at the folder, then at her. "We already have abundance, a home, a daughter, supper on the table. Is that not grand enough?" She studied me as though deciphering a foreign tongue. "Enough is never enough. This is destiny." I lay awake that night to the clatter of her typing, a relentless metronome drowning my thoughts. Morning brought Clara at the table, cereal untouched, thumbing through photographs of her mother at a gala. "Dad," she asked, "why don't you dress better? Mom looks like New York. You look like the janitor's closet." I laughed, but the sound rang hollow. Children are mirrors. Someone had etched that reflection into her mind. Weeks later, I revealed my surprise: tickets to a ball game in the city. She had once adored baseball, the roar of the crowd, the scent of popcorn, the thrill of a foul ball landing near her glove. She wrinkled her nose. "I can't. Mom's taking me to Denver. There's a showcase. I must be there." "Must?" I asked. "Yes, it matters. Baseball doesn't. Not just the words, but the cadence, final, irreversible." Childhood had been traded for strategy. My daughter, once begging me to teach her a curveball, now calculated weekends by their networking potential. I clutched those tickets, the edges biting into my palms, and recognized the slow erosion. Not a cataclysm, a steady slip like sand spilling through desperate fingers. Alina was blind, or perhaps willfully indifferent. Already she scrolled flights, praised Clara's professionalism, and booked Denver. I was background noise. They were my universe. That night, I fetched water and found Sophia gathering folders. She paused, lowered her voice. "She's unstoppable, Alina. She won't pause until she burns herself hollow." "And Clara?" I asked. Her eyes fell. "Clara is learning to match her stride, but children shouldn't." Then she vanished down the hall, her words circling me like moths in dim light. It was then I understood. Alina wasn't merely climbing. She was pulling Clara into the ascent, sculpting her into something sharp, gleaming, and brittle, while my influence dulled into irrelevance. I longed to fight, to clutch the little girl who once wept at my absence, who once clung to my hand at the zoo. But ambition is missed. You cannot seize it. You can only watch shadows stretch longer across the wall. And so I watched, powerless, as my family leaned ever further into a world where I no longer belonged. The evening of Clara's 16th birthday unfurled like a velvet curtain it scarcely required. The ballroom, perfumed with lilies and perfumed wealth, gleamed beneath chandeliers that fractured light so extravagantly even the ice cubes shimmered with arrogance. My tie, fussed with twice, still felt like borrowed armor, an impostor's badge in a senate of elegance. Alina emerged first, silver silk orbiting her body like a comet in slow passage. Flashes burst, bodies rose. She thrived on the applause of light bulbs dying for her image. Clara followed, faultless in a gown sculpted through fittings and size. Her glance brushed mine only briefly before she sought approval not from me but from her reflection in a champagne flute. I had imagined a hearth-lit gathering, a cake carved by an ordinary knife, the three of us mending memory through repetition. In my pocket sat a modest bracelet, small as a stone, its book-shaped charm a relic of her old wish to write stories. Against the glare of crystal and clamor, the gift felt laughably mortal. Though the invitation had promised celebration, it unveiled itself as a gala. A stage glared, screens bloomed with Alina's empire, catwalks, covers, pop idols draped in garments dearer than my salary. Sponsors' logos ticked by like restless stock markets. I recognized one. An academy where students were not admitted but curated. Dinner unfolded, so did speeches. A councilman's praise, an investor's hymn to vision. Clara's chair clung to Alina's orbit, leaving me adrift. When a server offered wine, I refused. Clarity was my only refuge. The lights dropped. A video began, not of baby photos, but of a brand's genesis. Alina's voice sanctified fabric and storefronts while music swelled like a prophecy. Then Clara appeared, standing within a blanched void, chin raised. "I am proud to embody our next chapter," she intoned. The room thundered with applause as if electing a dynasty. My palms joined reflexively. Fathers applaud even when unseen, even when uncertain. Then the revelation struck. Alina at the microphone. "Tonight we honor more than a birthday. We announce our relocation, new headquarters in New York, a residency partnership, a scholarship bearing my daughter's name. Clara begins Hawthorne Academy next month. She departs this week." This week. My fork screeched across porcelain. Around me, conversations hummed on while my chest froze into silence. Decisions carved without even a whisper toward the man once trusted with field trip slips. Clara embraced her mother to ovations. A stranger behind me murmured, "Power move," like commentary on a perfect play. Without memory of rising, I was suddenly at the stage's edge, voice steadied by years of lecterns. "We need to speak," I told Alina. "Not tonight, Martin," she countered with a smile practiced for public eyes. "Then when, before she leaves, or after she is gone?" Clara slid between us. "Dad, please don't make this a scene." "A scene," I said, "is a choice about a child made without her father." Alina's gaze hardened. "Hawthorne opens doors beyond your imagination." "I can imagine one," I murmured. "The front door of our house, I thought she'd still cross it." Sophia, Alina's aide, appeared, a clipboard like a shield. 5 minutes in the green room. We slipped behind the curtain into a cramped chamber with water younger than our marriage. I placed the gift box on the table, fragile as a paperback among tomes. "Clara," I asked, "is this your desire?" Her eyes darted to her mother. That glance answered louder than her words. "It's an incredible opportunity. Everyone insists." "Everyone," I said softly, "is rarely the compass worth trusting." Alina folded her arms. "She needs structure, mentors, exposure. She needs a father who knows where she'll sleep next month. That father might consider trusting the mother who has built something from ashes." "We built a family from nothing," I said, memory tugging sharp. "A radiator hissing, a sink dripping, rent overdue, still we called it enough because she slept safe in the next room." "Enough," Alina hissed, "is a shield for small lives." "An empire," I replied, "is often a veil for small kindness." Clara sighed. "I don't want this fight tonight." "Neither do I told her, "but I want to know why I wasn't called." Alina set the acceptance packet before us, deposit brochure, blazers posed beneath autumn leaves curated for catalogs. Deadlines, I couldn't risk hesitation, you would have stalled. "Likely," I admitted. "That's what parents do. We hesitate when roads carry children too far." Sophia whispered, "Travel is arranged. Housing is ready." I turned to Clara. "What about your friends, your childhood?" She shrugged, a gesture that felt borrowed from someone older, colder. "We'll face time. Screens do not embrace." I swallowed the thought. Back on stage, toasts cascaded. Clara thanked her mother, her team, her community. Omission thundered louder than mention. My name never surfaced. Cake arrived like modernist architecture. I offered my small box. Clara opened it, manners framing the motion. The bracelet glimmered for a flicker. Her 8-year-old self returned. Then it vanished. "Thank you, it's sweet." "Remember the stories we invented in the car rides?" I asked. She nodded once. "That was long ago." It wasn't, but ambition bends clocks cruelly. The ballroom dissolved as guests drifted. Alina's lips pressed in unfinished arithmetic. "We'll finalize tomorrow." "Tomorrow," I echoed. Once tomorrow had been a spacious word. The parking garage clung to daytime heat. I passed a family, father with sport coat, mother in flats, boys fencing with balloons. The sight blurred as though smeared by grief's thumb. At home, I sat in darkness. Silence perched beside me, heavy and unkind. The speech's echo replayed, erasing me line by line. The doorbell startled near midnight, a courier. For Mr. Vega. Papers precise, dissolution, custody, consent. I held them standing, unwilling to grant them the weight of sitting. Perhaps Alina had timed it all. Perhaps nothing was accident. I left the envelope beside untouched fruit. Across the kitchen, a small lamp lit the piano. My fingers found an old hymn my mother hummed when the world grew unmanageable. Notes floated clean, fragile. Tomorrow's headlines would celebrate expansion, scholarships, empire. No mention of the man who carried home an empty box and a hollowed name. I thought of lessons once given, that families don't fracture in an instant. They separate by increments until one evening the gap can be measured without tools. That night delivered the measurement, and the house felt it too. When kinship begins to splinter, it does not collapse in a thunderous instant. It unravels strand by strand, like a timber beam groaning before it succumbs. The dawn following Clara's birthday revealed an absence more piercing than any quarrel. The chair opposite me at the kitchen table remained vacant, not from tardiness, not from youthful whimsy. She had departed. Packed suitcases, hurried steps, and the hum of an airport car whispered their farewell long before sunrise. Alina and Sofia had ferried her away under the cloak of silence, as though quietude could soften abandonment. I lingered with a cooling carafe of coffee and a sealed envelope of legal parchment abandoned on the counter. The home, once pulsing with Clara's untied sneakers and Alina's scattered bolts of fabric, seemed staged, hollow, as though we'd already vanished and neglected to close the door behind us. That day, I wandered through town. Faces greeted me with polite smiles, yet their eyes concealed sharper questions. They had glimpsed the headlines. Vega legacy expands to New York. Glossy photographs of Alina and Clara framed as if the world were their stage. My absence in those glossy frames was a proclamation louder than any sentence. At the bookshop, Mrs. Kincaid raised the paper like a banner. "Proud of them, Martin?" she asked, her tone earnest. My throat tightened, but I forced a smile. Of course, pride and sorrow often masquerade as twins when the voice refuses to betray them. Weeks slipped away. Clara called twice. The first time, exhilaration spilled from her, names tumbling from her lips, families entrenched in dynasties I could scarcely pronounce. "Dad, it's extraordinary," she breathed. "The world feels like it's unfolding at my feet." I told her I was glad, and I meant it, though the words corroded on my tongue like iron left too long in rain. The second call arrived in the small hours. Her voice was polished, burnished by appearances and rehearsed poise. She had attended a gala, smiled for cameras, worn a gown branded with her mother's ambition. "Mom insists this is just the start," she said. I asked if she was resting. A pause. "Fine." Then softer, "Dad, don't worry so much." But worry is the father's inheritance. Back in the emptied rhythms of home, my days sprawled too wide. Teaching had once tethered me. Retirement now left me adrift. I mended the squeaky hinge, brushed paint across the porch, ordered books by alphabet as though order could soothe absence. By evening, I would sit before the piano, fingertips hovering over keys without daring to summon sound. On one restless Friday, I sat in the stands at a high school football game. I knew none of the boys, but I yearned for the roar of belonging. Beside me, a father thundered with raw, unrefined pride as his son dashed into glory. His voice was cracked, unpolished. For a moment, I envied that raucous truth. Then a letter arrived. Cream-hued envelope, Alina's hand sharp upon its face. Her script no longer curved with tenderness, it was clipped like signatures designed for contracts. Inside lay a single sheet. "Martin, for Clara's stability, transitions must be smooth. My lawyers have outlined revised custody terms. Please sign promptly. You will, of course, remain welcome for visits." A ledger entry. Nothing more. 2 decades of marriage reduced to a courteous directive. I did not sign, not yet. I placed it beside the earlier documents. Each morning I poured coffee, glanced at the stack, and felt its leaden weight anchor me. It was Sofia who next appeared. Twilight draped the house when the bell rang. She stood there, scarf knotted, clipboard absent, carrying not papers but gravity. "May I step inside?" We settled in the living room. She refused coffee, clasped her hands, and after a long breath said, "She's pressing Clara too fiercely." I studied her. "And why confide this to me?" "Because you're the only one Clara might still heed." I almost laughed. Alina listening to me, that bridge had long collapsed, yet Sophia persisted. "Clara aches for you. She disguises it. She's been schooled to hide fragility, but I see it. At night she stares at her phone as though to call, then withdraws. She's suffocating under expectations." "Mr. Vega." "Martin," I corrected. She nodded. "Martin." Alina confuses relentlessness with strength, but endurance without pause mutates into cruelty. Her word struck cruelty, not born of malice, yet cruelty all the same. I remembered Clara at 8 clutching her notebook, asking if stories could breathe. That child still lived within her, gasping for air. After she left, I sat before the piano once more. This time I played. A hesitant phrase, faltering then fuller. Notes echoed through the house, shaking dust from silence. For a fleeting interval, loneliness loosened its grip. The next week I purchased a train ticket to New York. Not for confrontation, not to claw Clara from her mother's orbit, but to witness for myself whether Sophia spoke truth. The city devoured me. Horns blaring, neon bleeding, tides of strangers surging faster than thought. I found the academy, its gates wrought iron, its walls venerable yet gleaming. Students streamed by, blazers tailored, confidence rehearsed. Through one pane of glass I saw her, Clara. She laughed with two companions, laughter bright, brittle, the kind that conceals more than it yields. My chest tightened. She appeared older, sculpted by haste and heritage. I did not call her name. I simply watched, a father beyond the glass, hoping foolishly that she might sense my presence. She did not. That night, in a narrow hotel room, I lay awake beneath the city's restless hum. Somewhere in that clamor, my daughter forged a life she had not chosen but inherited. Somewhere she was hardening, quickening, receding. And I wondered, had I already lost her? Or did there remain a sliver of time to remind her that sufficiency itself can be life's rarest wealth? The documents lingered at home, but so too did my decision. By the hour the story crowned the front page, I had already been appointed the antagonist. Vega dynasty ascends. A visionary mother lifts daughter to Eastern prestige. The headline warbled. The follow-up paragraph, lighter in wit yet sharper in accusation, alluded to a divorced husband who resisted momentum. My name remained unscripted. In a town this compact, silence brands harder than syllables. At the grocer's aisle, Mrs. Delaney inquired if I sought assistance. Her tone carried warmth, but her gaze drifted toward the folded paper in my cart. I replied I was all set. Truth said otherwise. One can be intact and fractured simultaneously, like a porch beam that looks steadfast until someone leans. I treaded along Main Street with the day's humiliation tucked in my pocket, anger coiled tight, an ember I feared feeding. Faces nodded briskly, cautious, as though I were a tale still bleeding into its next chapter. I lingered before the barbershop window, watching fathers shepherd sons under draping capes, strands cascading like discarded burdens. I loitered long enough to feel absurd for loitering. Back home, the house met me in its usual tongue, ordered, taciturn, elegant lines, a piano reflecting more truth than any mirror could. The legal envelope still loomed on the counter, daring me. I brewed coffee, poured, abandoned it untouched. The phone lit with a message from an old pupil, a snapshot of a paperback I'd once sworn by, captioned, "You were right." The note steadied me more effectively than caffeine ever could. The next ring belonged to Clara. The pulse of the metropolis buzzed beneath her voice. "Dad, you shouldn't scroll the comments," she began without a greeting. "I haven't," I dissembled. "They're cruel," she said. "People never grasp the truth." "What truth eludes them?" "That this helps me." I squeezed the receiver as though force might collapse distance. "Goodness always exacts a toll," I replied. She exhaled irritation. "You always cast blessings like warning labels." I imagined her threading through bright avenues, hurried feet around her. "I'm proud," I said. "Proud of your work. I only hope the girl who once asked if novels could breathe still remembers to breathe herself. Quiet stretched. Then Mom insists the past keeps you stunted, and I contend the past is a compass, not a cage. We're not the same person, Dad. Her voice softened to almost mercy. Don't make this harder. I won't, I said, though difficulty rarely requests consent. Call me when you can. I'll try. I lingered at the table long after the line cut, the tick of the clock slicing time into reminders that hope often waits longer than wisdom advises. The mail arrived tardy. Amid catalogs and furnace coupons nestled a sleek envelope from an unknown law firm. Inside, a decree of temporary restrictions on contact disrupting academic adjustment. Language smooth as stone, cold as marble. It claimed unplanned appearances bred emotional disquiet. I envisioned the academy's wrought-iron gates, myself standing outside in silence. The corner surveillance lens, too, recording me into whatever story its captions chose. That evening I drove to the church, not for ritual but for the honest air preserved in sanctuaries. I lit a candle for no particular soul and all I cherished. Flame steadied my hands. Outside, twilight lowered itself tenderly over the steeple as if dusk understood fragility. In the lot, a man from the hardware shop hailed me. "Tough week," he said, kindness lacing the phrase. "They never print the slow hours," I replied. "The slow hours, the intervals between headlines, the marrow of a life." He clapped my shoulder. "Keep on. Persistence is no blueprint, but it suffices." I drove through neighborhoods where supper scents still lingered. Over a fence, a father read aloud, chapter rhythm, faltering voices. It fell into me like an unwritten hymn. The twist arrived the next day. Sophia's call. Her voice was steady in the brittle way one treads ice. "You deserve to know first," she said. "Alina fainted during a fitting, rose too quickly, hadn't eaten, brushed it aside. She's at the hospital." My knees weakened. I sat before they chose for me. "Is Clara there?" "She's at class. I'm with Alina. Tests are underway." Sophia paused. She laughed at the Roman 4, called it jewelry. "That's her," I whispered, love threading my words despite the years hollowed. "She's exhausted, Martin, beyond tired." After the line fell silent, the house felt like the breath caught between inhale and exhale. Sparrows bickered on the fence, wings frantic with urgency. I lied to myself, all would be well, age should teach better. That night the hospital called, not Sophia, not a nurse, the hospital. "Next of kin?" The voice asked. "Former spouse," I admitted. Paperwork tasted bitter aloud. "We need you to come." The drive blurred, traffic lights, taillights, every glow a riddle. In the lobby the floor gleamed with antiseptic shine. Sophia met me, scarf ill-suited to season, eyes carrying more words than her lips dared. "What happened?" She collapsed again. They moved her. "There," she stopped. "Come." Alina lay diminished beyond memory's allowance, machines chanting sterile hymns, monitors glowing like false auroras. A physician murmured terms: arrhythmia, complications, interventions, clinical lexicon where grief translates itself. I hovered beside her bed, hand inches from hers. Words swarmed yet collapsed into one. "You made something luminous," I whispered. "You just forgot you were part of it." Her eyelids trembled. Perhaps she heard. Perhaps the body keeps kindness secret when the mind battles. Clara arrived, hair undone, blazer awry, youth leaking away. She locked eyes with me, then took her mother's hand, bending low to make a sound I had not heard since her infancy. The primitive sound of the world refusing to obey. Doctors reappeared, voices threading prayers disguised as plans. 50 minutes bent into eternity. When monitors surrendered, they surrendered without crescendo, just small, final abdications. Sophia pressed the call button. Staff filled, then emptied. The doctor spoke her name, then her past tense. I let go of breath like a rope slipping through hands gone numb. Memory surged, her laughter in a diner, fabric pinched between two fingers seeing future garments, a crooked tie she left askew with a kiss instead of correction. Clara leaned into me, her body collapsing into shade. Words were useless. Fatherhood is often that, becoming a floor where collapse might land. Sophia's hand alighted on my shoulder. "There's paperwork," she whispered, regretting instantly. "It's all paperwork," I replied, "until it ceases to be." Outside, chairs lined the corridor, patient as saints. The three of us sat time choice, love sketching a triangle. A nurse brought a plastic sack, a bracelet, a phone, lipstick the hue of courage, a receipt stamped with the word joy. I took the bag as though breaking anything now would demand forgiveness beyond reach. Night air outside felt medicinal. Stars were faint but present if one insisted on seeing. Clara's hand clutched my sleeve. "Don't go." "I'm here," I answered. My phone buzzed, a lawyer's neutral cadence. "Mr. Vega, Elena's estate requires arrangements. There is also a letter addressed to you." A letter from the woman who taught fabric to dream and taught our daughter the future should stride a runway. I agreed to come. He told me to take my time. Time had already exacted its fee. I drove Clara home, Sophia's car trailing. Clara slumbered against the window, grief granting its heavy sleep. I kept the radio silent. The tires hummed their promise. The town ahead waited in its ordinary disguise, scar newly carved beneath. At the house, I carried her bag and Elena's small kingdom. The envelope still brooded on the counter, impotent against what had come. Clara paused at her doorway. "Can I?" she faltered. "Yes," I said. She embraced me with the memory of daughterhood, no rehearsal required. Hope, stubborn as ever, drew its chair closer. When she vanished into her room, I descended to the piano. The keys lay ready. I touched them gently, like a father brushing hair from a sleeping child's brow. The notes that rose were unadorned, meant not for yesterday but for a dawn I had yet to learn how to live. Grief reconfigures a dwelling without sound. The dawn following Elena's departure bore the same outlines, yet beneath the still surfaces, everything was unsettled. Her absence drifted into the corners like a chill draft seeping through fractured walls. Clara drifted about the kitchen, appetite forsaken, tugging open the refrigerator only to seal it shut again. My own hands betrayed me. I brewed 2 cups of coffee before recollection struck that one would remain untouched. By mid-morning, the telephone broke the hush. A composed male voice introduced himself as Daniel Price, counsel to Elena's estate. His request was brief, his cadence clipped. I was to attend his office in the coming week. "Certain provisions must be received in person," he said, leaving no margin for dissent. Clara was waiting at the table when I set the receiver back. Her eyes bore redness, though her posture was resolved. "That was about Mom." "Yes," I replied. "Her lawyer, he expects us." Her jaw clenched as she nodded. "Good, then we can put matters in order." The maturity in her tone startled me. 16 years old, yet already clothed in the lexicon of executors. Provisions, estate, settlement. Words that seek to confine grief into signatures and neat columns of ink. The week limped forward. Condolences descended like a steady rain, neighbors carrying casseroles, acquaintances sending bouquets who hadn't darkened our doorstep while Elena breathed. I accepted each gesture with mechanical gratitude, sliding dishes into the refrigerator until it resembled a banquet for specters. On Thursday, Sophia arrived. She carried no paperwork, no officious presents, only a plain bag holding a forgotten sweater Clara had abandoned in New York. "She'll want this," she murmured. Her quiet solidity did more for the air in that room than any wreath of lilies. When the appointed day emerged, Clara and I drove downtown. She wore the bracelet I once gifted her, its small charm, a book wrought in silver catching shards of sunlight through the car glass. For a heartbeat, hope pressed against my ribs. Then she turned, arms folded, sealing herself again. The law office perched on the 3rd floor of an aged brick structure. Inside, the odor of varnish and paper mingled. Diplomas lined the walls, glass frames glinting beneath sterile light. Daniel Price greeted us with the solemn precision of one who has conducted such rites countless times. We took our seats opposite his polished desk. Clara leaned forward, all poise and determination, like a young litigant ready to stake her claim. I reclined, fingers laced, feeling like an intruder in a realm of clauses and fine print. Adjusting his spectacles, "Mr. Price began. I realize this is difficult. Your mother prepared her will with care. It was reviewed only months ago and reflects her definitive wishes." Clara's chin tilted upward. She wanted me to carry her work forward. Everyone knows that. He offered no confirmation, only drew open a thick folder. To my daughter, Clara, he read, I leave the residence in New York, inclusive of furnishings and sufficient accounts for maintenance. Furthermore, a fund is established for her education to be released incrementally as milestones are fulfilled. Clara breathed out, half relief, half vindication. She cast me a glance. See, this is the natural order. But then Mr. Price turned another page. His tone never faltered. The remainder of the estate, including business holdings, investments, and controlling interest in Vega Atelier, is transferred to my former husband, Martin Vega. The words fell like iron weights in still water, sending ripples through every corner of the chamber. Clara stiffened, lips parting without voice. A whisper escaped. That can't be. I felt my lungs collapse. There must be error. We were divorced long ago. She forged this life afterward. Mr. Price shook his head gently. There is no error, Mrs. Vega was of sound mind. She left a personal letter to accompany these directives addressed to you, Mr. Vega. Clara's hand crashed upon the desk. Impossible. I was beside her. I bore her name in every venture. I carried her weight. She wouldn't strip it away and hand it to him. The lawyer's cadence remained level. I know it wounds, yet these were deliberate choices. Clara turned her fury on me, face aflame. What did you do? Poison her mind? Did you whisper to her when she was weak? Clara, I murmured, I haven't spoken to your mother of business in years. I had no hand in this. She shook her head fiercely. No, she would not cut me off and deliver it to you, not after everything. Mr. Price slid forth a cream envelope, Alina's handwriting looping across its face, for Martin. My fingers trembled as I lifted it. The room blurred when I unfolded the page. Her words rose as though her breath still warmed them. Martin, if your eyes meet these lines, my body has betrayed me sooner than my heart. I know this decision will stagger you and it will ignite Clara's fury. Yet I forged it with clarity, not remorse. You never chased dominion. That is why I trust you with it. You reminded me that life is not measured by applause but by what endures when silence descends. Guard what I built not to justify me, but to prove love can endure beyond ambition. The parchment quivered in my grip. Clara's chair shrieked against the floor as she stood. She was deceived. I'll fight this in court. Her voice sliced sharper than any contract. I reached for her sleeve, but she recoiled, eyes burning. You never merited this. You never will. Mr. Price pressed on with legalities, but his voice dissolved into distance, drowned by the tempest in my daughter's gaze. I sat hollow, letter pressed to my chest, realizing that my existence had been rewritten. Not by ink, nor by clauses, but by a woman whose last act was to return me to a promise once called forever. I held her handwriting as one might cradle a relic of brittle porcelain, conscious that even a hurried glance could fracture something irretrievable. The parchment carried the faint echo of her fragrance, that resolute perfume she wore when conviction needed to command a room. I lingered over every phrase, allowing the cadence to settle into me. You never longed for limelight, Martin. That is why I trust you to angle its beam toward others. If authority must exist, let it be yoked to service. If wealth must flow, let it surge toward mercy. My throat cinched. Her words spoke with the same serenity I had once heard when youth and poverty convinced us that kindness alone could weather tempests. I turned toward Clara. Her countenance bore the sculpted stillness of bronze statues, crafted for plazas, not the warmth of parlors. Yet the letter continued. Clara will call this theft. It is not. It is a redirection until she discerns the distance between a throne and an ordinary chair. She has comfort enough, sustenance to study, room to expand, but not abundance enough to drown. I pray she learns to swim without gold shackled to her ankles. Clara bent forward. What else? I folded the paper carefully. That she loved you, I answered. Enough to gamble on your fury. Clara's laugh sliced the air. Love that dresses as eviction hardly feels like love. Mr. Price cleared his throat, a man nudging silence aside. There is an addendum. He produced a second dossier, the terms of transition. I braced, but the strike landed anyway. Effective immediately, Mr. Vega is named chair of the board, he declared. Temporary authority remains with present leadership, and there is a directive appointing Ms. Sofia Ramirez as advisor to the chair for 12 months, renewable. Clara's eyes sparked. Of course. Sofia. It was your mother's appointment, Mr. Price said evenly. She valued Ms. Ramirez's acumen, and in her words her conscience when mine outran me. Sofia, long the discreet rhythm beneath our household, was abruptly pushed center stage. I saw her precise notations, her unerring half-step behind Alina, the one who always caught what slipped past others. Trust, once granted, leaves visible residue. Clara's voice flattened. So the script is clear. Polish me for show, enthrone him for power, keep Sofia tethered nearby. I faced my daughter. To me, this feels less like power, more like ballast. And ballast you're eager to shoulder, she snapped. You think I coveted this? I think you thirsted to matter. I had no reply, not because her words were truth today, but because they had once been. I had longed to matter to two people whose strides outran my own. That desire can twist a quiet man into thunder. I had labored to quiet it. She had never witnessed that labor. Mr. Price pressed on. Conditions bind the estate. A foundation is mandated. 40% of annual profits dedicated to education and the arts. Scholarships in Alina's maiden name for public school students. Executive bonuses capped until these initiatives are fulfilled. I shut my eyes. In the phrasing allocate cap fund, I heard her tongue. But in the intent classrooms, books, scaffolding of lives, I felt my own. We had disagreed on much, but somehow in this we converged. Clara glared at the desk. And my inheritance. A document slid across. Released in milestones, course you were completed. 1 year's employment outside the family business. Proof of solvency, no debt beyond student loans. She skimmed it. She distrusted me. She wished you free, I said, but freedom and trust travel different roads. She pushed it back. Spare me the metaphors, Dad. I reached again for Alina's script. One final passage waited. If you rage, Clara. Rage at the clock I raced, not the hand now stilled. I built fast for fear of ordinariness. Your father showed me ordinary is where love exhales. Walk there sometimes. You'll find me. Clara rose sharply. Copies, all of it. You'll have them, Price said. She drifted to the window, eyes on the cars obediently lining painted spaces. You know what they'll say, she murmured. That I was never enough, that she saw me as a flaw to fix. I longed to rest my hands upon her shoulders as I had when she was small, when certainty was something I could drape like a shawl. They'll craft the story that reads easiest, I said, but we don't reside inside their sentences. She spun, wounded. Then answer plain, why you, why not me? Because I won't spend it proving anything, I said. Not to her, not to the crowd, not even to myself. That's convenient. No, I said quietly. It's ruinous. You just can't see the invoice yet. The chamber thinned into hush. Even the clock above the doorway ticked cautiously, as if uncertain it had permission. Sofia slipped in with soft apology. She must have waited outside, a witness to the recalculations of our family's ledger. She took her seat discreetly. Price listed logistics, transfers, upcoming sessions, bylaws to be signed. He passed me a pen. It weighed like an heirloom, heavier than mere ink should allow. I signed as the man Alina had requested, not the one I had been. Clara's phone buzzed. Her lips curved into disdain. Press already caught scent. They call it a shock. Some call it folly. Headlines thrive on sensation, I murmured. She pocketed the device. I'm calling a car. Let me take you home, I said. Home, she arched sarcasm. Which one? I mean wherever you rest tonight. I won't rest, she said. Not while the city believes I've been benched. I left her metaphor uncorrected. She wasn't benched. She was simply being asked to play another game. Clara, Sofia whispered, your mother asked me to guard you too. Clara smirked. How munificent. It isn't generosity, Sofia said. It's a task I cannot complete without you. That candor clipped Clara's tongue. Truth has a way of disarming fury. She adjusted the bracelet at her wrist and turned away. Price handed me a smaller envelope. One last note for both of you. I opened it, 2 simple lines. If I taught you to climb, forgive me for not teaching you to rest. If he taught you rest, forgive him for not scaling beside you. Clara swallowed. She loved symmetry. She loved balance, I said, but she misplaced the fulcrum. Clara seized her bag. I need air. We stepped into the hushed corridor. At the elevator, she stabbed the button. The doors opened. We entered, Sophia trailing. 3 souls sharing a box as if it were neutral ground. At the lobby, the doors parted. Outside, sunlight sprawled across pavement like unrolled parchment. Call me tonight, I said. Her answer, maybe. Maybe is a beginning. Her car arrived. She glanced back, something fragile surfacing, then retreating. I didn't ask for this story. Neither did I said. But we're inside it now. Let's not become its worst versions. She slipped into the car. Traffic consumed her. For a breath, the city mimicked silence. I stood with Alina's letter pressed to my chest, the future rearranging its furniture around me. Sophia watched me the way nurses regard stubborn patients, respect mingled with doubt but readiness. Where do we begin? I asked. Somewhere small, she replied. Where money meets people, that is where Alina pointed. I nodded. The foundation, the schools. Rooms where stories root before headlines feed. I could begin there. The boardroom would follow. Behind us, the elevator chimed for another appointment. Before us, the day opened like an unfurled map. I inhaled, the breath of a man drafted into a role he never sought yet could not abandon, and stepped into the waiting light. The council chamber exhaled an aroma of tanned hide mingled with veiled stratagems. Tall panes of glass framed a metropolis of steel and glass, yet the truest vista was the glistening boardroom table stretching out like an airstrip awaiting arrivals. Figures clad in meticulously tailored attire occupied their stations, their devices silenced but not abandoned, companions waiting for summons. At the helm, a vacant throne awaited my claim. Lowering myself into it, I could feel scrutiny pressing upon my shoulders. Some gazes parsed me as though I were an equation to be solved. Others weighed me as a barricade to be dismantled. A handful harbored pity, the muted pity one reserves for a craftsman gripping unfamiliar instruments. To my flank, a chair screeched across the marble. Clara. She entered her place wrapped in a blazer stiff as armor, visage unyielding as quarried granite. Without sparing me acknowledgement, she established herself by mere proximity, a tacit decree. She would not cede ground. Sophia commenced, her voice as even as a pendulum swing. Figures, percentages, directives, Alina's blueprint rendered in precise syllables. 40% pledged to scholarships, investment ceilings, carefully crafted reinvestments. Her delivery monopolized the chamber for nearly half an hour, her tone the solitary tether holding the room. When she ceased, silence lingered like smoke until a voice fractured it. Commendable, certainly, yet unsustainable. Diverting 40%, we stifle our own momentum. A second voice rose. Markets demand expansion, not philanthropy. Clara bent forward, eyes alight. My mother built this empire upon audacity, not sentiment. Scatter scholarships like confetti and we'll hemorrhage legitimacy. Her rhetoric cleaved the room, nods blooming, murmurs rippling. She embodied her mother's steel, incisive, persuasive, unflinching. Pride and grief collided within me, storm fronts meeting over open sea. Then the orbit of eyes encircled me. I drew breath. Growth is not merely towers raised nor ledgers fattened. Growth is the footprint left in the very soil that nurtured us. Alina, your architect, saw legacy not in glossy spreads but in classrooms illuminated, in libraries humming. Deny that and we diminish her vision. A director allowed himself a sly grin. With due respect, Mr. Vega, your métier was English literature. This arena is commerce of a global scale. Polite laughter fluttered around the table. Heat climbed within me, yet I reined it. Yes, I taught words. I taught children who entered classrooms with hollow stomachs, with shoes frayed to threads. And I learned deprivation starves brilliance, not drive. Alina understood. She meant to nourish both. The chamber shifted, hesitancy pricking at certainty. Then Clara lunged. Or perhaps, she hissed, eyes pinning me, You are revising history to veil inadequacy. You lagged behind her brilliance, so now you dress stagnation as principle. Don't costume mediocrity in the robes of morality. Her accusation struck deep, not for its insult but for the echo of my own doubts whispered in sleepless hours. Steeling myself, palms pressed to the polished wood, I answered, "Clara, your mother bequeathed you radiance, but radiance unguided veers into tempests. She entrusted me not for my shimmer, but for my ballast. I knew how not to founder." Her jaw tightened, stone upon stone. "You recite apologies polished into philosophy." I leaned in, my voice a current for her ears alone. "No, you hear a father who yet loves his daughter even when she mistakes inheritance for essence." The room quivered, unwilling spectators to a drama stitched in bloodlines. The finance chair interjected, clearing his throat as though to cleanse the air. "We must resolve. Are we steered by affection or by strategy?" From my jacket, I retrieved Alina's second testament, addressed to both Clara and me. I laid it upon the table like a verdict. "By this," I said. The chamber froze as I unfolded it. "If coin is the measure, let it count doors unbarred, not doors bolted. If family is the inquiry, let it respond with inclusion, not exclusion. If legacy is contested, let it rest upon service, not ovation." The atmosphere transmuted. Even skeptics bit their lips, reluctant to dismiss the weight. Yet Clara was unyielding. Rising, her chair shrieked protest. "This is theater. You grasp at her halo while I bear her fire. I will not permit you to cloak her empire in soft charities and eloquent sermons." She departed in thunder, heels striking judgment with each step, the door's slam reverberating like a gavel closing court. The chamber exhaled as one, and all focus bent upon me. I folded the letter with reverence. "We honor Alina by uniting both realms, prosperity and purpose, expansion and enlightenment. We were never meant to choose between them. She asked us to weave them together." For the first time, Sophia's hand reached mine, steadying. "Then let us vote." Hands lifted, timid, staggered, but sufficient. The motion passed. Alina's will would breathe. When adjournment came, I remained. Beyond glass, the city glittered in arrogant height. Yet my gaze lingered only on the silhouette of Clara's forsaken chair, tilted, accusing, resonant with her absence. Because triumphs inscribed in boardrooms cannot quiet the civil wars within a household. The metropolis slumbered beneath its own glitter. I reclined upon the balcony of the penthouse, Alina's self-proclaimed diadem. Yet to me, it felt more like an echoing cavern than a crown. Glass monoliths radiated light in every direction, jeweled towers piercing the dark, but none of their brilliance could soften the vacancy Clara's absence had carved inside me. The verdict had already been cast. The boardroom murmurs ended in resolution. Attorneys wrapped the proceedings in ribbons of legality. Ink, still wet, chained the empire, her fortune, her dominion, even her legacy to my custody. But contracts are paper, and paper cannot silence memory. What I heard most vividly was not applause nor triumph, but the haunting percussion of Clara's heels retreating across marble. My mind strayed backward, toward a gentler era. A child who once crafted coronets out of notebook scraps, who ruled her blanket fortresses with a giggle, who pressed my hand in solemn trust at crosswalks. That child believed in me before ambition seduced her away. And I, somehow, lost her faith. That loss bore more weight than inheriting billions, heavier than any skyscraper Alina left behind. Sophia arrived quietly, balancing porcelain cups that breathed steam into the cool night. She set one before me, her gesture unadorned by conversation. Presence itself became her offering, and I welcomed it. Some silences arrive gilded with a tenderness that words would only bruise. I studied the spiral of vapor and murmured, almost to myself, "How do you span a chasm when the other side is intent on fire?" Her reply fell like a stone in a river. "By standing firm on your shore, by refusing to abandon it." Her utterance tethered itself to me. Alina's final testament had entrusted me with untold wealth. Yet Clara's wrath revealed what wealth really was, not treasure but fetter. An inheritance without reconciliation becomes nothing more than a polished shackle, So I bent to ink. Days later I composed a letter, no defense, no courtroom plea. Instead it carried remembrance: you are not merely the sum of estates. You are not only what you conquer. You are my child. That tether survives storms, eclipses, even silence. Neither distance nor currency can sever it. Perhaps she will never unfold the envelope. Perhaps it will yellow in drawers, waiting like a lantern in perpetual dusk. Yet it exists, glowing quietly against despair. That evening revealed to me a subtle revelation. Revenge is not always spectacle or punishment. Sometimes vengeance is survival, proving that burdens others wagered would ruin you can, in fact, be borne with dignity. Redemption, by contrast, is not an award claimed but a discipline lived. One quiet act, one deliberate mercy. I rose, porcelain cooling in my hand, and surveyed the city's glittering mask. Alina had surrendered her empire into my keeping. I, in turn, would surrender trust into time's keeping, believing life itself would carry Clara back when it willed. For the truth remains unvarnished. Riches corrode, surnames fade, steel crumbles. But love, its imprints, its stubborn endurance, outlasts granite, outlasts us. And if these words struck a chord, if you found yourself dwelling in their echoes, I ask only this: let your support be the wind that keeps such stories alight. Offer a like, share your reflections in the comments, and subscribe so the flame continues. I am grateful truly that you are here listening.